And there, in the sacred grove, surrounded by spirits and secrets, Sarah and Daniel came together as husband and wife once more. But this time, every touch burned like fire, and every breath carried thunder, the kind of pleasure that makes a man cry out to the gods. 3 nights passed. Sarah was still missing. On the 4th night, just before dawn, Daniel heard the door creak open. She had returned, but she looked different. Her wrapper was brighter, her eyes sharper. Her skin glowed like she'd bathed in starlight, and on her neck hung a string of sacred beads he had never seen before. She said nothing. Daniel just stared at her, mouth dry. "What are you?" She tilted her head. "Your wife." "You disappeared for days. The women in white, the forest, the chanting. What are you hiding?" Sarah sat on the mat and crossed her legs like nothing had happened. "You ran," she said softly. Daniel blinked. "Anyone would have." She nodded. "Maybe, or maybe not. The truth was too much for you, but it is still the truth." Daniel was torn. Part of him still feared what he didn't understand, but another part, a deeper part, longed to understand her, to know what lived in her silence. She leaned forward. "You can still choose. You can turn your back, or you can follow me. One more time." Daniel stared into her eyes. He remembered her tears, the peace on her face, the women who never raised their voices but seemed to carry a power deeper than sound. He took a breath. "I'm scared," he admitted. Sarah smiled. "That means you're ready." And so, the final journey began. The next night, just before the village cock could crow, Sarah stood at the doorway again. She didn't say a word. She simply looked at Daniel and tilted her head toward the dark forest path. Daniel, already awake, rose without speaking. His heart beat heavily, but he didn't hesitate. He tied his wrapper around his waist and followed. This time, he didn't stumble. He didn't hide. He walked beside her. They moved silently through the bush path, past moon-soaked shrubs and whispering trees, until they reached the sacred stone circle once more. The air was thicker this time. Even the frogs had stopped croaking. Waiting there were the women in white. The tall priestess with the silver locks stepped forward. "He has come willingly." Sarah nodded. "He is ready." Daniel stepped out, bowing low. "Please, I had to know. I love her. I only wanted to understand." The women looked at one another, then at Sarah. "It is time," the old one said. "He has seen. He must know everything." Sarah stood, wiping her tears. "Then take us to the river." And with that, they all turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving Daniel with no choice but to follow. What awaited him by that river would change their love forever. Soon, they arrived at a river so still it looked like a mirror. The water reflected the moon, the stars, and the faces of those who carried secrets. The women formed a circle on the riverbank. Sarah stood in the middle, and Daniel stayed just outside, uncertain if he was welcome. He had never felt so small. The eldest woman turned to him. "You love her," she said, not as a question, but a fact. "With everything in me," Daniel replied, voice shaking. "Then you must see what love truly means." She pointed to Sarah. She was born during the Harmattan, when the winds carry voices from the spirit world. Her mother, too, was a silent one. Chosen women who carry joy, not with noise, but with depth. To some, pleasure is loud. To others, it is still, deep, sacred. Daniel swallowed. Why didn't she tell me? Because silence has always been my way, Sarah said, walking toward him. Even as a child, I felt things too deeply. My mother taught me that not every joy must be loud, but I didn't want to scare you. The priestess turned to Daniel. You saw what you were not meant to see. You heard what was sacred. Now you must carry what only few men have ever dared to carry. Daniel swallowed hard. What must I do? She walked around him slowly. You must pass the test. The test of silence. The test of the flesh. The other women began to hum again. That deep, slow, haunting sound that pulled at the soul. You will lie with your wife, the priestess said. But if you make a single sound, even a whisper, even a moan, death will kiss your lips before morning. Daniel's eyes widened, but she raised her hand. There is no second chance. To know the joy of the silent ones, you must become one. Sarah took his hand and led him to a mat laid with white cloth beneath the moonlight. The women turned away, and there, in the sacred grove, surrounded by spirits and secrets, Sarah and Daniel came together as husband and wife once more. But this time, every touch burned like fire, and every breath carried thunder, the kind of pleasure that makes a man cry out to the gods. And yet, he didn't. Not a word, not a groan. His hands dug into the mat, his teeth clenched tight, his eyes flooded with tears. But he held on to silence. The test ended just before dawn. The priestess returned and placed a bead on his chest. You have passed. Daniel collapsed. When Daniel woke up the next morning, he was back in his hut. Sunlight poured through the window, but everything felt far away. Sarah knelt beside him, brushing his forehead with wet cloth. He blinked at her and tried to speak. No words came. His lips moved, but no sound escaped. He sat up in panic. Ah! Nothing. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You must not speak. For now. He tried again. Not a whisper. Outside, the voices of the villagers began to rise. Daniel hasn't come to the shrine this morning. He didn't open his workshop. Is he sick? That afternoon, the village elder sent boys to summon him. When Daniel stepped out of his hut, the whole compound froze. He walked slowly. His eyes were calm, but his mouth never opened. When someone greeted him, he only nodded. When they asked him questions, he stared blankly. Words spread like wildfire. He doesn't talk anymore. Did he see a spirit? Was he cursed? Sarah, what did you do to your husband? But Sarah said nothing. No one dared touch her. No one dared challenge her. They remembered the old stories of women who disappeared for days and returned glowing, of men who went silent after a visit to the forest. Daniel stopped carving wood. He stopped going to meetings. He simply sat under the mango tree behind their hut every evening, watching the sunset in silence. Some said he'd gone mad. Others whispered he had become a spirit. But only Sarah knew the truth. Every night, they lay together as husband and wife, and Daniel still said nothing. But when she looked into his eyes, she knew. He felt everything. And when tears rolled down his cheeks in silence, she kissed them with pride. because now her husband had joined the sacred circle. He had passed the final test. He had become the silent moaner.